By the late Third Age, Sauron was poised to conquer Middle-earth, and even a united Free Peoples could not match his military power. However, as Gandalf explained to Frodo, there was more than one power at work, beyond any design of the Ringmaker. Inspired by his Catholic faith, Tolkien infused his work with a sense of divine providence. Eru Ilúvatar revealed the history of Arda to the Ainur, but not the destiny of its children. The Valar in turn sent emissaries to Middle-earth to advise and persuade the Free Peoples to unite in love and understanding against all those whom Sauron would endeavour to dominate and corrupt. Despite being overwhelmed militarily, fate would intervene to see Sauron defeated. Welcome to our video on the 5 Valar who came to Middle-earth during the War of the Ring, and how they, but Gandalf most of all, shaped the course of history. The Valar were given the task of being custodians and observers of Arda, but not active participants in its every event, for when they did intervene, it often led to disaster. When the Valar bade the elves to depart Cuivianen and undertake the great journey to Aman, it led to sundering and conflict. Later, their participation in the War of Wrath contributed to the destruction of Beleriand. Rewarding the Edain after their trials helped precipitate Numenor's downfall and reshaped Arda. Afterwards, the Valar stepped back, allowing first the elves and dwarves, and then increasingly men, to take center stage. Their decision to step back paid off, and by the end of the Second Age, these Free People united to defeat Sauron militarily. As the shadow grew during the Third Age, the Valar sent emissaries to Middle-earth to aid the Free Peoples. These were Maiar of their highest order, clothed in the Hroa of men, forbidden to reveal their true forms or openly display their power. Bound by the rules of divine providence, they were bidden only to advise and persuade the Free Peoples to unite in love and understanding against all those whom Sauron would endeavour to dominate and corrupt. They became known as the Istari and did not possess complete knowledge of the future, particularly regarding free will. There were 5 amongst the ranks: Iwendil of Yavanna, Olóin of Manwë, and Vada, Alatar and Pelando of Orome, and Curmo of Auli. Each pursued their mission with different approaches. Around SA 1600, the 2 blue wizards came to Middle-earth and travelled east and south, founding magical cults and encouraging rebellion against Sauron. This hindered Sauron's ability to gather and train armies in the east and south during the Second and Third Ages, helping ensure that Sauron's forces would not outnumber the west. Saruman was initially the most powerful of the 5 Istari and volunteered to come to Middle-earth. Saruman begrudged Gandalf, who did not wish to come to Middle-earth and had to be compelled by Manwë to do so. In TA 1000, Radagast the Brown, Gandalf the Grey, and Saruman the White arrived in Middle-earth and were greeted by Círdan the Shipwright. Círdan deemed Gandalf the wisest of them and bestowed upon him Narya. This planted a seed of jealousy within Saruman, as he travelled east and Gandalf west. Radagast did not travel widely and settled in Rhosgobel, watching the growing shadow of Dol Guldur. He befriended animals, especially birds who served as spies, but his love of creatures ultimately hampered his mission among the Free Peoples. Of the Istari, only Gandalf would remain steadfast in their mission, and thus became the key instrument of Eru Ilúvatar's designs. By TA 1100, the Wise grew concerned about a growing shadow over Dol Guldur. Gandalf suspected it was Sauron, and ventured there in TA 2063, but Sauron evaded him. By TA 2463, the Wise formed the White Council to unite and direct forces against what they deemed the work of a Nazgûl, or some new evil. Initially, they consisted of Gandalf, Galadriel, Elrond, Círdan, and Saruman. Galadriel wished Gandalf to be the leader of the council, but he refused the position, seeking to retain his independence. Saruman took the position in Gandalf's stead, but resented not being the second choice. When Sauron returned to Dol Guldur in TA 2460, he launched a centuries-long campaign of divide and conquer, sending the Uruks to attack Ithilien and the Orcs to fight the Dwarves for possession of the Misty Mountains, and the Balchoth to assault Gondor. Furthermore, he helped to manifest the reappearance of dragons in the north. Meanwhile, Saruman took up residence in Isengard in TA 2759, and kept its Orthanc stone secret from the White Council, his first treacherous act. Fueled by jealousy over Gandalf's gift of Narya, he began studying magical ring lore. This turned into an obsession with the One Ring, and the forging of his own Ring of Power. As Saruman brooded over his new fixation, the wave of growing evil tidings throughout the land prompted Gandalf to infiltrate Dol Guldur again in TA 2850. There he found the Dwarven king Thrain II being held captive. Thrain gave Gandalf a map and key to Erebor, and discovered that the shadow behind the swell of darkness engulfing the world was Sauron. At a White Council meeting the following year, Gandalf urged an immediate attack on Dol Guldur. However, Saruman overruled him, arguing that it was not necessary because the One Ring was lost, so he was no immediate threat. Unbeknownst to the wise, Saruman was hunting for the One Ring, and believed Sauron's growing power would reveal it. Gandalf remained concerned that Sauron would exploit Smaug's desolation to regain the northern passes, and possibly reforge Angmar. He sought out Thorin Oakenshield, who planned to battle Smaug, persuading him to form Thorin and Company with the hobbit Bilbo Baggins. Gandalf devised for them a plan. They would slay Smaug, and Bilbo would seize his treasure hoard. However, Gandalf provided no method for Smaug's slaying, trusting fate to intervene. During the journey, Bilbo discovered the One Ring. Initially, Bilbo contemplated killing Gollum, but he ultimately took pity on him in another twist of fate. In TA 2941, Gandalf again urged the White Council to attack Dol Guldur. This time Saruman relented, believing that driving Sauron from Dol Guldur would aid his search for the One Ring. That year, the White Council dislodged Sauron from Dol Guldur, and Smaug was slain. Erebor was reformed, and the Free Peoples won the Battle of the Five Armies. The Northern Orcs suffered catastrophic losses, allowing the Beornings to reopen the High Pass and the Ford of Carrick, enabling west-to-east travel once more, and shifting the balance of power in the north. Then, in TA 2951, Sauron declared himself openly from Mordor. 2 years later, the White Council convened for the last time, at which Saruman claimed the One Ring had been lost to the Beligir, quieting his peers. However, at this time, the elves of Mirkwood informed Gandalf that Gollum was hunting for the thief of his magical ring, Bilbo. In TA 2956, 3 instruments of fate collided when Gandalf met Aragorn while on his hunt for Gollum. The wizard befriended the hidden heir of Isildur, and henceforth the two began working together against Sauron. In TA 3001, Gandalf convinced Bilbo Baggins to leave his magical ring to Frodo. Afterwards, Gandalf went to Minas Tirith to study the lore of the Rings of Power. In TA 3017, Aragorn captured Gollum and interrogated him with Gandalf. Gollum revealed he had been held prisoner at Barad-dûr. Under torture, he had told Sauron of the Shire and Baggins, convincing Gandalf that Frodo had the One Ring. None but Eru Ilúvatar would know it, but each would play a crucial role in the downfall of Sauron. The next year, Gandalf convinced Frodo to take the One Ring to Rivendell, and acquired Aragorn's assistance as an escort. On the road, Gandalf encountered Radagast, who Saruman had sent to invite him to Orthanc. Both Radagast and Gandalf were deceived, as Saruman revealed his true intentions and imprisoned Gandalf. With the help of Gwaihir, Gandalf escaped, now realizing that Saruman and Sauron were serving a common purpose. All the other Istari had failed their mission. It fell to him alone to unite the Free Peoples to defeat Sauron. Both Gandalf and Saruman were forbidden from revealing their true power, for such revelation would draw the wrath of the Valar. Consequently, each had to rely on uniting their respective forces to confront the other. However, by TA 3018, the elves were departing for Aman, and Durin's folk had not recovered from their war with the Orcs, and loss of Khazad-dûm to Durin's bane. Strength remained in men, but they alone could not hold back Sauron. Gandalf understood that the original mission of the Istari could no longer succeed. At best, the united Free Peoples could only delay Sauron's conquest of Middle-earth. However, fate had placed the only means of defeating Sauron into the tiny hands of a hobbit. Gandalf travelled to Rivendell to discuss the matter with Elrond. Elrond argued they could not send the One Ring to the Valar, for they would not receive it, as the affairs of Middle-earth now rested with its inhabitants. In contrast, Gandalf pointed out that they could not entrust the One Ring to the incorruptible Tom Bombadil, as he would probably discard it. Ultimately, both agreed that, without the One Ring, Sauron would still overwhelm Middle-earth militarily. The only viable path to save the Free Peoples was to destroy it, and that destruction required casting it from the fires of Orodruin, where it was forged. Faced with dire circumstances, Gandalf and Elrond convened a council on October 25th, attended by most of the representatives of the Free Peoples. The attendees all brought ill tidings from their regions, and were surprised when Elrond explained the history of the One Ring. and Gandalf advised destroying it in the fires of Orodruin. Despite some dissent, all present submitted to Gandalf's plan, and the Fellowship of the Ring was formed. Gandalf was appointed as their leader and would guide them into Mordor, but he possessed no plan on how to do so. Much like his approach with Thorin's company during the time of Bilbo Baggins, he left it to fate. He explained to the Ringbearer that the ring's discovery by Bilbo had a purpose beyond mere chance, and that there was a larger force at work guiding events. During the Fellowship's perilous journey through Moria, Gandalf faced a pivotal moment, and sacrificed himself to shield the others from Durin's bane. He spoke a word of command to break the bridge of Khazad-dûm, as he and the Balrog fell together into the abyss. They battled for 8 days through the bowels of Arda and up to the peak of Celebdil. There they fought another 2 days until Gandalf slew the Balrog, casting him over the mountainside, and Gandalf's Hroa was destroyed. Gandalf's ultimate choice to sacrifice against the Balrog was a test that he alone among the Istari had passed. He conformed to the ordained path, relinquishing personal hope of success. In response, Eru Ilúvatar returned him to Middle-earth as the sole emissary of the Valar, granting him additional authority to reveal more of his Maiar power. Gwaihir bore him to Lothlorien, where Galadriel clothed him in white, replenished his strength, and granted him a new staff. He learned that the Fellowship was still making its way toward Orodruin. Unable to aid Frodo anymore directly, Gandalf's mission shifted back to uniting the Free Peoples to delay Sauron's conquest. In another twist of fate, Gollum had caught up to Frodo and Sam, and just as Bilbo had, they both took pity on him, sparing his life. Thus, Gollum accompanied the hobbits, guiding them into Mordor. Meanwhile, Gandalf met up with Aragorn, Legolas and Gimli to guide them towards Edoras, where he encouraged King Theoden to take up arms against Saruman. During the siege of Helm's Deep, Gandalf rode out to rally the Westfold hosts under Erkenbrand. The Rohirrim were saved by Gandalf's efforts, as Merry, Pippin, the Ents and the Huorns wrought devastation upon Isengard, annihilating the remnants of Saruman's orcs. Gandalf confronted Saruman at Orthanc, offering forgiveness for his betrayal of their shared mission, but Saruman rejected it. Gandalf took pity upon him, breaking his staff, casting him out of the Order, and placing him under house arrest. On March 5th, Pippin touched the Orthanc stone, unknowingly feeding Sauron false intelligence that Saruman had taken him captive, and that he possessed the One Ring. Sauron tormented Pippin, urging him to inform Saruman that he would send for him immediately. Gandalf then realized Sauron's greatest fear was that someone else would use his One Ring against him. Exploiting this fear, Gandalf formally entrusted the Orthanc stone to Aragorn as its rightful master, signaling that it would eventually be used by him. The next day, Aragorn gazed into the stone and revealed himself to be the heir of Isildur and wielder of Andoril. Sauron was shocked, as he had believed the line of Isildur was broken, and worse, it appeared that Aragorn had overthrown Saruman and taken the One Ring from Pippin. To Sauron, it seemed fate had chosen the descendant of the man who cut the One Ring from his finger to use it against him. In a wild panic, Sauron threw centuries of war plans aside and ordered the Witch King to launch an immediate assault on Gondor, intending to defeat his enemies before they could use the One Ring against him. Gandalf encouraged King Theoden to ride for Gondor's defense, while he departed with Pippin to confront Steward Denethor II. Gandalf attempted to counsel the ruler, but was met with suspicion rather than agreement. When Faramir fled Osgiliath under Nazgul attack, Gandalf rode out and revealed some of his Maiar power to save him. Afterwards, Faramir informed Gandalf that Frodo, Sam and Gollum were heading into Cirith Ungol. Gandalf was surprised by this route into Mordor, but not alarmed, recognizing Sauron's gaze remained fixed on Gondor, and his misbelief that Aragorn possessed the One Ring. As Minas Tirith faced siege and Denethor abandoned leadership, Gandalf assumed command of its defenses. His presence inspired hope among the defenders and dispelled fear of the Nazgul. When Grond broke the front gates, Gandalf stood defiant at the gateway, and even when the Witch King of Angmar threatened to kill him, Gandalf remained resolute astride Shadowfax. Fate intervened when the Rohirrim's approach was heard, causing the Witch King to withdraw. Gandalf did not pursue the fleeing enemy. Instead, he rushed to save Faramir as Denethor took his own life. Against all odds, the siege was lifted, and Éowyn and Merry defeated the Witch King. Despite their victory, Sauron's forces were waging a multi-front war against Dale, Erebor, Lothlorien, Mirkwood, and strategic points along the Anduin. Sauron retained substantial forces within Mordor, enough to overwhelm the Free Peoples. The West was doomed. At the last debate, Gandalf elected Aragorn, Imrahil, and Éomer to represent the Free People's leadership. Here, the culmination of his grand deeds and plans now converged upon a strategic fold. Gandalf recognized that Sauron could simply wait out the war for ultimate victory, but he also still feared that the heir of Isildur would wield the One Ring to sway his captains against him. To exploit this fear, Gandalf advised the Lords of the West to launch a suicidal march upon the Black Gate as a feint. Only with this action would Sauron's gaze be fixed on Aragorn, depleting Mordor of her armies and opening a path for Frodo. Gandalf and Aragorn led the army of the West towards the Black Gate. There they confronted the mouth of Sauron, who revealed Frodo's mithril coat and barrow blade, but said no word about the One Ring. Realizing Sauron still did not have it, he rejected Sauron's proposal of surrender and gave battle. Vast armies of orcs, trolls, and evil men advanced against the army of the West. As the Battle of Morannon began, Frodo finally succumbed to the One Ring. In terror, Sauron realized his great blunder and sent the Nazgul to the Crack of Doom. Gandalf, the wisest of the Maiar, and the Sol Istar remained true to his mission. He successfully kindled the hearts of the Free Peoples of Middle-earth to overcome the evil of their time. The heir of Isildur's courage was able to focus Sauron's fear upon him, and not the Ring-bearer. Bilbo, Frodo, and Sam's pity for Gollum was rewarded. Gollum suddenly attacked Frodo and stole back the One Ring. As Gollum teetered on the edge of the Great Pit in triumph, whether it be Eru Ilúvatar, the breaking of his oath to Frodo, or a simple slip, Gollum fell with the One Ring into the Great Pit. We hope you enjoyed this video on the underlying forces which shaped the War of the Ring. More videos on Middle-earth are on the way, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see them. Please consider liking, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Our videos would be impossible without our kind patrons and YouTube channel members, whose ranks you can join via the links in the description to know our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our Discord, and much more. This is the Wizards and Warriors channel, and we will catch you on the next one.